Verse 5. This is the message we have heard from Him and announced to you, that God is light, and in Him there is no darkness at all. God is light. Now, when we hear that, primarily people begin to think, yes, God is holy. There's no blemish in Him, and that's true. But that's probably not John's principal idea here. You see, there was a group of people. They can't really be called Gnostics, but at least they were the beginning of the Gnostics. A terrible, terrible cult that did great damage to Christianity in the first several centuries of Christianity, and actually still exists today. Not only in a group called Gnostics, but it has permeated even parts of evangelicalism. They were a dangerous group, and they were teaching basically this, that God is not light. God is dark, in the sense that God is hidden, esoteric, that you can't really know God. The common man, the common believer, can't really know God. Only these super spiritual people could actually know God. And that in not knowing God, we also couldn't really understand the will of God or what He really requires. You see this in secular thought today, don't you? All the politicians will say they believe in God. It's just that He can't be known and He hasn't spoken. So you can say you believe in God, and yet you don't have to do a thing He says. But John comes back, and what does he say? No, God is light. And in this case, knowing John, knowing the Gospel of John, I would say that his principal idea is God has revealed Himself. God has made Himself known. So look at it that way. This is the message we have heard from Him and announced to you, that God is light, and in Him there is no darkness at all. Verse 5, if we say we have fellowship with Him. So many times this passage is taught as referring to believers, of whether or not believers are walking in fellowship or believers are not walking in fellowship, but that's completely outside the context of this passage. To have fellowship with God is to be a believer. To be outside of that fellowship with God is to be an unbeliever. Now that's all there is to it. That's what John is teaching. So basically he's saying, if we say we are Christian, if we say we have fellowship with Him and yet walk in darkness. Now the word walk here is peripateo from the Greek. Peri meaning around and pateo meaning to walk. It means to walk around. It is a word commonly used by John, commonly used by Paul, and it refers to a style of life in every area of life. That the Bible sees no room for dividing our existence into secular and sacred. Or there are places where we should obey God and places where it does not pertain to God. That is not the way the Bible sees it. That all things pertain to God. And that our style of life, if it is honest, if it is true, we will practice our religion in every place that we walk. So he says, if we say that we have fellowship with Him, that we are believers, and yet we walk in what? That our style of life is immersed in darkness. Now, what is darkness? It's not what you think. It is more evil than you actually believe, and it is less evil than you actually believe. You think darkness would have to do with something that would have to do with Satanism or witchcraft or atheism. No, the idea here is this. What is light? God's revelation. What has God revealed? He has told us who He is, and He has told us what He has commanded. That is light. We know we have light shed upon who is God. We have light shed upon what is God's will. The one who walks in darkness walks in a way that contradicts what God has told us about Himself and contradicts what God has said about His will. That is what it means to walk in darkness. Now, I want us to look at something. Because we have to be very, very careful here. First of all, the word peripateo is in a present tense, denoting continuous action. It's not just talking about a moment in time, but it's talking about the style of a person's life. So that if you were to simply judge a person by one moment in time, you could grossly misjudge that person. You could see a true believer commit a deed that was sin and immediately write them off as an unbeliever. But that would not be biblical. It would not be fair. It would not be correct. Or you could see a person with grotesque morality and hatred toward God. You could see them and in one moment see them do something of a righteous deed and come to the conclusion that they are believers. So you see, both of those aorist tense moments, those points in time, are deceiving. But what the Bible is talking about is looking at their entire style of life. How do they live over the full course of their days and over the full course of all their activities? How do they live? Do you see that? Now here's the question for you. Do you walk in darkness? And realize this, you could walk in darkness and be very, very moral. Do you walk in a way that contradicts what God has revealed about His nature, about who He is? Do you walk in a way that contradicts what God has revealed about His will? Does your lifestyle, is it a contradiction to the will of God? Or is it in accordance with the will of God? We could set it this way if we wanted to go back to the book of Ephesians. Are you walking according to the course of this world, of this age? Are you going with the flow? Are you walking contrary to the course of this world with your eyes set upon the will of God and being conformed to the image of God?